Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to this Asa Abloy Academy presentation on ordering Corbin Russwin Master Keyed products. My name is Tom Seidel. I will be your lead instructor for today. This session should last about 45 to 50 minutes. We will allow some time at the end for question and answer. However, if you do have an immediate question on something that we are discussing, you can go ahead and type that into the Q&A, and I will address in real time as appropriate. Your lines will be muted, so you can use the Q&A to ask questions. This session is being recorded and should be available within 24 hours on the Academy website. Within 24 hours, you should also get an email from Zoom, which is your proof of attendance for this class. If you're using these courses for continuing education, that will be your proof of attendance. We do not normally issue certificates for these 1-hour trainings. We also invite you to check out the Academy and see what we have available in the online courses. You can take any classes that suit your needs, and you can do it at your own pace. Let's go ahead and get started. First thing we're going to look at here is a breakdown of the part numbers for Corbin Russwin cylinders. Bear in mind that if you are ordering the Lockset complete with a cylinder, the cylinder comes with it. You don't need to make any specification for the actual cylinder itself. So a Mortise lock would have the Mortise cylinder included unless you ordered less cylinder. With the Mortise cylinders, our 1000 series is our Mortise cylinder. The first 2 digits would be 10, and then the mechanism would be a 0 for the 3rd digit, or an 8 for large format interchangeable core. The 4th digit would be a 0 or a 1 for standard or hotel function type cylinders. With Mortise cylinders, you would then specify the length spelled out. 114 is 1 1/4, 134 is 1 3/4, and so on. With Corbin Russwin, if you are ordering the Mortise cylinder separate, you need to specify the cam. Corbin Russwin has several different cams, and it's based on the application, what you're actually putting that cylinder into. Certain functions of Mortise locks utilize different cylinders. Sometimes different cylinders on the inside and the outside, if it's a double cylinder function. So the best way to check that is to look in the Corbin Russwin catalog, and on the page that has all the different functions, it will show you a picture of the required cylinder. You would then specify how many pins you would like in that cylinder, how many chambers, 6 or 7, and that would be based on the size of the system. We will get into the math a little bit later. And then the keyway would be specified last. Our 3000 series is our rim cylinder, and the nomenclature works exactly the same way. The 0 for standard, the 8 for interchangeable core. Function is 0 for standard, 1 for hotel function. The length is not as important with the rim cylinder, but you can specify the length of the tailpiece that comes off of the rim cylinder. Then you again specify 6 or 7 pin and your keyway. Our 2000 series are our component type cylinders, which would be key and knob, key and lever, and deadbolt type cylinders. And our 8000 series is our core only. So you would specify your cylinder type, mechanism, function, length, cam, pins, keyway, finish. Let's take a deeper look at each one of these. Our Mortise cylinders, again, are 1000 series, and they are available in lengths from 1 inch to a 3 3/4 inch length. The cams would be selected based on the application. The 1000 series can be purchased in 5, 6, or 7 pin configurations. The 6-pin is standard. 7-pin would be used, again, when you need additional keying capacity. The 5-pin cylinders really aren't used in commercial work. However, if you do have an existing 5-pin project, we can key into that. Corbin Russwin is very, very good on maintaining their existing systems and products. So if you have something that is 5-pin, they will work with it. These cylinders are available in 11 standard architectural finishes and are usually done to match the finish of the hardware that it's being put into. Again, the 1000 series Mortise cylinders are predominantly used in our Mortise locks. They can be used for dogging on exit devices, in our keyed removable mullions, as well as key switches. You'll select the cam on the back of the cylinder to operate the proper function. As a matter of fact, Corbin Russwin's ML 2000 series Mortise lock, you can actually change the function on some of them by changing the cam on the back. The rim cylinders are the 3000 series. There are 7 available tailpiece lengths, depending on your application. These are normally used in our exit device trims, as well as rim locks and certain deadbolts. And the tailpiece length would be determined by what you're using it in, and the thickness of the door as well. On our normal exit device trim, you would use a -058 length, which is a 5/8 inch length. Or you can order a standard tailpiece, and the tailpiece has segments in it that you can break off as needed. But I will warn you, if you break it off too short, then you can't add the tailpiece back to it. You've got to buy a new tailpiece. 6 or 7-pin is standard. I'm sorry, 6-pin is standard, 7-pin is available. Same 11 finishes. We can do this as a thumb turn cylinder for special applications. That's the 3300 series. Take a look at our component cylinders. Our 2000 series component cylinders are used in our cylindrical knobs, as well as cylindrical levers and deadbolts, as well as our key and knob and lever exit device trims. The 2100 series are used in hotel function cylindrical locks. We had discussed hotel here earlier. Let me explain exactly what that is. Hotel function and hotel function locks are used not so much in hotels anymore, but they're used in applications such as restrooms on public corridors, in public buildings, or especially schools. The idea behind that is if someone goes into that room, they have to use a key to get in. They turn a thumb turn on the inside, which renders that cylinder non-functional. Meaning, if you're in there doing your business, somebody else cannot come in until you release the turn piece on the inside or exit the door. There is an emergency key that can operate that. Again, we'll talk about the hotel function. We don't see it in hotels anymore, but we do see it in those public spaces. So our 2000 series key and lever, key and knob cylinder, component cylinder has 12 available tail pieces, and the tail pieces are used based on application, what it's being used in. 6-pin is standard, 7-pin is available with 5 of our cylinder types. Depends on the lock that you're putting it in. Our 2400 series key in knob, key in lever are available in competitive keyways such as the Schlage C keyway and the Sargent LA keyway. That way you could provide a Corbin Russwin lock with a competitive keyway. Our 8000 series is our core only. Corbin Russwin only manufactures large format interchangeable cores. And there's a difference between what we call large format interchangeable core and small format interchangeable core. The concept is interchangeable cores allow for immediate changeover, for fast rekeying of the locks. It's a convenience thing. You use a special control key that enters into the key and turns the keeper on the inside of the core, which allows you to pull the core out and replace it with another core. It's great for construction purposes. You can do a keyed or temporary plastic disposable core during construction and then replace that with the final keyed core. It allows you to place your master keying order later in the process versus having to order it at the beginning of the order. When you're buying the interchangeable core, you must specify that you want a control key as well. It is not supplied unless you request it. So again, getting back to the format, Corbin Russwin's large format interchangeable core only fits in Corbin Russwin housings. Just like Schlage and Sargent and Yale, each one of those have a large format interchangeable core that is unique to their product. There are, however, universal interchangeable cores. They're called small format interchangeable cores. And you would see those in Arrow, Best, Falcon, companies like that. Any one of those cores can be placed into any one of those small format housings. So bear in mind, Corbin Russwin can manufacture a housing, a mortise cylinder housing, a rim cylinder housing, or a key-in knob or key-in lever that can accept a competitive small format interchangeable core. However, we do not manufacture any small format product at Corbin Russwin. This is our mortise cylinder. Notice it went from a 1000 series to a 1080. That would get you a complete cylinder, which would include the housing as well as the large format interchangeable core. If you wanted the housing only, you would order it as a 1070. A 1040 would be the housing that we discussed for the small format interchangeable cores. Our interchangeable core cylinders are available in 6 different lengths, 10 different available cams in either 6 or 7-pin configuration. Same architectural finishes. And again, we talked about the temporary interchangeable cores, which we will delve into a little bit deeper in a bit. The 3080 is the same nomenclature layout as our 1080. The 30 tells us it's a rim cylinder. The 80 tells us it's a complete large format interchangeable core cylinder. The 70 would be for the housing only. The 40 would be for the small format interchangeable core housing only. 5 tail pieces, 6 or 7 pin, 11 finishes. Again, we can do these with temporary construction cores in either a keyed configuration or a disposable plastic configuration. The idea behind the keyed interchangeable cores is you can then return them for credit. The plastic ones are disposable. Keying options. You can order cylinders from Corbin Russwin a couple different ways. Master keyed. That's what we're talking about here today, where you have a cylinder that's configured to operate with multiple keys. You can order them keyed random or keyed different, meaning that you have a bunch of cylinders and they're each keyed to their own key and they have no relationship to each other. You can order the cylinders 0-bitted, meaning that they are complete functioning cylinders. You have your top springs and top pins, and you have a number 0 bottom pin. You will get blank keys with that. The only thing that will operate that is that blank key. Again, sometimes it's convenient to have all those parts in there for when you want to rekey those cylinders in the field. The other way would be uncombinated. There, the cylinder is provided with the plug and the housing. There are no pins, no springs, or keys provided for those. Facilities, locksmiths like to order them that way. That way they can then take that cylinder and load the pins in from the top and key it into their system that way. When we're talking about keyways, we're going to talk about their standard stock type keyways. Corbin Russwin's standard stock keyway is the L4. The L4 is a family of 4 different keyways in that L series family. There's an L1, an L2, an L3, and an L4. Those can be used independently or combined into a larger system, which we'll explain here in a minute. If you do not specify on a project, you will get L4, especially if it's keyed random or uncombinated. That is our stock keyway. We also do offer some previous stock keyways. When Corbin and Russwin were separate companies, there was a D series family for Russwin. The D1 was the stock keyway. And in the Corbin, it was 59 series, which was the 60 keyway. Again, was the stock keyway. When they combined in the early 90s into one company, they created this new family, the L family. So the nice thing about conventional keyways is open sales. Anybody can buy them. You don't need any documentation. You can send a purchase order into Corbin Russwin and get 100 cylinders in any of those stock open keyways. You can buy key blanks from Corbin Russwin. The downside is you can also buy key blanks from Ilco, Lori, KSP, any of those aftermarket brands, because there is no control on any other manufacturer making any of these open keyways. So while it's convenient for the distributor to be able to buy them, the owner of that facility does not have much protection in the way of keeping keys from being duplicated. We can stamp the keys with a little warning that says do not duplicate, but honestly, that is only going to keep a good locksmith honest. You can go to self-service kiosks in big box stores and stick that key into their machine. That machine can't read do not duplicate. If they have that keyway available, they can cut a key on it. That's one thing to consider, when you're setting up your keyways. So those are the Corbin Russwin standards. Corbin and Russwin also have several different multiplex keyways. We talked about the L family. We also have the D, which was carried over from Russwin. That's 4 separate keyways. We have the 59 series, which was carried over from Corbin, which has 9 keyways. We have our H series, which has 8 keyways as well. Corbin Russwin also has several different older multiplex keyways. The 27, the 57, the 67, the 77, the 981, the A, the N, 852. Now, when I'm talking about multiplex keyways, I alluded to this in the last slide. When you look here on this slide on the right-hand side, you'll see that there are 9 separate keyways, the 59A1 down through the 60. Each one of those has a key that will correspond to it. But if you look above that in that chart, the 59A1 and the 59A2, there is a key above that that says 59A. That 59A key blank could enter both of the keyways below it. If you look above that, the 59AB could enter the 4 keyways below it. We don't offer the 59AB as a keyway, but that key is what they call a multiplex key, can enter and theoretically operate all 4 of those keyways below it. And going across, you see the same thing happening. And you see at the top, we have a 59AD key that could enter all 9 keyways. And while I bring up the multiplex keying, the reason for that is on very, very large systems. With master keying, you only have a certain number of available change keys under a master. And we'll talk about how the system stretches like a rubber band. The more masters you need, the less changes you can have below them. So the more levels you need, the less changes you can have. But on incredibly large systems or school districts, college campuses, hospital campuses, things like that, this gives you the availability to reuse those pinning specifications here across 9 different keyways. And you could cut your higher level keys, your great grand and grand masters, on these multiplex keys. Give you much more flexibility. However, Corbin Russwin also has a handful of what we call simplex keyways. The simplex keyways are basically 1 key one keyway. So when you're designing a system, it's good to know how big the system might need to be, because you can't change it later. You can't add unless you've planned for it. So now that we've talked about the normal Keyway families, let's talk about some of the technologies that Corbin Russwin offers. First one we're going to talk about is our master ring key system. This master ring key system dates back to the late 1800s. It was actually invented in 1889. And what this does is it allows you to expand the capacity of a typical 6-pin key system to that of a 7-pin key system. I mentioned that we only have a certain number of available changes. And a lot of that has to do with the pinning specifications. There are two different pin specifications that exist. One is called a single-step progression, and the other is a two-step progression. The single-step progression is what Corbin Russwin uses for their newer systems. However, some of their older systems uses two-step progression. And we're talking about the thickness of the actual master pins and the top pins. And when you have a very thin dimension between each pin, between a number 1, a number 2, and number 3, the tolerances between your plug and your housing might require you, and it does require you, if it's smaller than 24 thousandths of an inch, you need to skip every other number in your progression. So in a typical two-step progression, 6-pin system, under a master key, you can get theoretical number of 4,096 changes in two-step progression. By going to this master ring system, there is a separate shear line that's developed for your change keys and your master, hence the name master ring. That will allow you to jump from 4,096 theoretical changes to 12,100 theoretical changes. Sounds awesome, but you have to consider this with this cylinder. This is not a normal Mortise cylinder. It is an 1.5-inch diameter cylinder. So for the convenience of getting that 7-pin capacity, you need a special Mortise lock. You need a special exit device trim. We cannot do master ring in key and lever. We can do key and knob, but ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, will not allow you to use knobs in new construction. So what you'll see now probably is master ring in existing facilities that they are maintaining, that they are keep going. If we're going to do a new key system, master ring's probably not the first one you'd come out, but I want you to know that it exists. Corbin Russwin also has several what we call restricted and protected keyways. The restricted keyways are geographically separated and only offered when requested. They're not patented. However, there's not generally that many of these in existence to justify for an aftermarket manufacturer to make these keyways and keys. The protected keyways, again, they used to have a patent. The patent expired in 2007. So they're in the same basic classification as the restricted. There's no patents, but they are very limited in use. It doesn't mean that somebody couldn't make an aftermarket key blank for this if they wanted to. We have, for new systems, we would probably point you in a different direction, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Corbin Russwin has a existing M-Heart, it's sometimes referred to as. It was a system that was patented in the 1970s. It is what we call a high-low system that incorporates high security cylinders and standard cylinders in the same system. You could cut the high security keys as your master keys, and they will enter and operate your standard cylinders, but will not work opposite. The standard cylinders will not enter and operate these M-Heart system. And if you look, the M-Heart system has angled top pins. You have left, right, center. However, your master pin and your top pin, they have a groove and a slot. So you must use the proper master pin, right, left, or center, and the proper top pin, right, left, and center. And when you enter that key in, it lines everything up and allows everything to turn. It is very, very difficult to pick, but it is also very, very difficult to service. If you look at the bottom of that key, there are grooves to allow for the key, when you spin it 360 degrees, to clear those top pin tabs. Well, the bottom of that key kind of acts like a saw in that brass housing. And what we see is a lot of times they tend to wear out. So several years back, the decision was made. We've used up the majority of our combinations in all of our different keyways, if you can believe that or not. All of those keyways that I showed you in the past, in our Z and DH class keyways, we used up the majority of the combinations. So we decided to retire this system for new construction. We will maintain any systems that are out there. Again, these are not easy keys to duplicate. You have to have the proper machine in order to cut them. You have to have the proper key blank, first of all. Know it exists. Moving on to other keyways, key systems. Corbin Russwin has the pyramid key system. The unique thing about this, it is now protected class. The patent expired on this in 2018. This features an interactive control pin. The pin is on the bottom of the key. If you see it in the picture, that is the pyramid. And that control mechanism has to align with the part on the bottom in order to create a shear line and allow you to turn the key. One of the unique things about this is it was designed as a 7-pin configuration, but it fits into a standard 6-pin housing. For interchangeable core, you could take that 6-pin core out, put a 7-pin pyramid in. It's the same size. And they did that by making the actual pin diameters a little bit smaller, so they could fit 7 chambers in where 6 were. This system is still heavily used. Again, we're not aware of any aftermarket manufacturers that offer that pyramid key blank as a standard. It is available in what we call security and high security. Security is pick resistant, and UL 437 high security is pick resistant as well as attack and drill resistant. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So the pyramid system is still a viable system. We will still maintain it. It is protected class. However, for new systems, the system that we recommend from Corbin Russwin, again, Corbin Russwin has over 170 standard keyways, not counting some of these specialty ones. If you're doing a new system, we recommend Corbin Russwin's Access 3. Access 3 system starts out, it is a patent protected system. It is patented through 2027. There are 8 different keyways. It is a factory designed master key system, secure, certified ANSI BHMA, grade 1. There are 3 different levels available in our Access 3 at 3 different price points. We have our AP, AS, AHS. Our AP is our patented key system, and it allows you to use standard pinning, top and bottom pins. Our AS is our security keyway. That gives us angled pins as well as a secondary locking feature. The AHS is our UL 437 high security, and that gives you the pick resistance as well as drilling and attack resistance. We can do some geographical exclusive keyways available in our security and high security. The nice thing about this, it is a high-low system where you could do your mission critical areas on the high security. You could do your interior spaces with the patented. Our high security key blank will enter and operate the patented. However, the patented will not enter the security or the high security. And I mentioned the 3 levels at 3 different price points. Most important to know is our AP patented is the same list price as our conventional key. It's kind of a no-brainer to go to Access 3 from conventional for new systems. The price goes up a bit for the security. The price goes up a bit more for the high security. But again, you can combine them all in the same system. The owner gets to determine the level of restrictions and can opt out of requirements for letters of authorization for each order. That tends to be a little bit of a pain for the end user to get to the distributor to get to the manufacturer. So if the owner in the beginning opts out of it, we can process some of these orders without those letters of authorization. So if you come to our key system specialists for a new system, we're gonna talk to you about a patented system. Again, Corbin Russwin will always maintain their existing customer base. If they have one of those older Keyways, we will still maintain it. We will still manufacture product for it. This chart is taken right out of the catalog, and it is a great tool to use when you're ordering the cylinders by themselves. And it's broken down: cylinder type, mechanism, function, length, cam, number of pins, and keyway. So now that we've talked about the products, let's talk about placing the orders. We know that the keying is one of the biggest pains on the project. Keying is almost the last thing that gets thought about in a project. However, depending on the complexity of the system, it may require a little bit more of attention early on. We need to have complete information before we can enter the order. I was guilty of this myself when I was in distribution. I've sent in orders to the factory, say, please process this order, keying information to follow. Well, they can't process the order without the keying information, so it would just sit there. So proper information needs to be relayed to the factory on the proper forms in the proper format. So we're going to talk a little bit about the blind code system, the DHI blind code system that virtually every manufacturer uses. And if you use this for your key set symbols, when you order it, you will virtually have no issues from the factory when it comes to that. The questions won't be, how do you want this to actually work? What we're showing you here is a 3-level system at the bottom, but let's start. If you think about it, master keying is done for convenience, not security. The more levels you put into a key system, the less secure your system actually is. So with that logic, the most secure key system is single keyed differently. When you start keying things alike, you make more keys work, individual cylinders. When you master key, you make more keys work in that same cylinder. So bear in mind, it could be a problem. So when we're looking at our basic master key here, 2-level system, you have 3 sets of change keys below that, and you have 1 master key. The master key at the top can enter and operate everything below it. So in a 2-level system, you see it's specified as AA. That is your master key. Your changes, your individual keys underneath that. 1 AA is your first change. 2 AA is your second. 3 AA, 4 AA, and so on. Now that's specifying this as a 2-level system. If you send that in, they know what the top level master key is. It's going to be AA. However, sometimes for more complex systems, you might go to a 3-level or a 4-level or higher system. So take a good look at that chart where you have your AA master key and your 1 AA through 3 AA. When we go from that 2-level to a 3-level, it changes. Here we're showing you a 3-level system, a grand master key with master keys and change keys below them. We have our grand master key A. We have our master key AA. Now notice the change keys. Because it's higher than a 2-level system, the number comes at the end. It's AA1 instead of 1 AA. Again, every manufacturer uses this blind code system. So it's not just ordering from Corbin Russwin. You could send an order in with this nomenclature to virtually every manufacturer and they would understand it. But notice you have 3 different master keys there, AA, AB, AC. There is no relationship between AA, AB, and AC. They are their own 2-level systems that are controlled by a grandmaster key above it. And the same thing, a 4-level system would be a great grandmaster with several grandmasters with however many master keys and however many change keys below them. And the chart would look exactly the same. Your grandmaster would be A, B, C, etc. And your great grandmaster would just be called G, G, M. There's some additional symbols for some specialty selective master keys that we use. ENG, engineering key, housekeeping key, janitor key, security key, groundskeeper's keys. Now, every one of those is what's called a selective master key. You would specify on the order which doors or which openings, key set symbols, you would want these selective master keys. Now, again, you're doing this for convenience, but if you think about it, security's needs for accessing a building are entirely different than engineering. Housekeeping, entirely different than groundskeepers. So by doing this, you're making it convenient for the owner, but you are limiting. When you add these selective master keys in, you are limiting your expansion capabilities. So again, all this information needs to be laid out ahead of time so we know. Now, I showed you that chart where we had your grandmaster at the top or your great grandmaster. Well, you can do individual changes under those as well. And how they look, GGM1 would be the first change under your great grandmaster in a 4-level system. Under your grandmaster, grandmaster A, A1 would be the first change, A2, A3, etc. So using that blind code system will help us help you. Okay. Again, call for assistance. Don't assume that we understand what you need. It is a small piece of the puzzle, but delays can cause headaches. And it's a team effort. Ask us. Your local DSS reps. Each agency that we have has what we call key system specialists that are employed, whose job it is to help process, to help through the process, to help guide you towards what needs to be done. Customer service, they're the ones you're going to interface with when the orders are placed. Key records is very, very, very important. They do a lot of work, and we'll talk about what they do here in a minute. Again, the sales reps are important, as well as training. I didn't mention us. We've been on COVID lockdown for a year, but we have been asked to train facilities people on their new key system. And we are available to do that virtually, and someday, hopefully, back in person. So, key records, very important. They process all of the factory keyed orders. They transmit the records to and from the plant. They maintain those customer records. They can give you information on an existing system. They can help designing that new factory master keyed system, especially if we know how big it's going to be. Bear in mind, the lead times are calculated from the date all questions are answered. So complete orders help. So we told you what we do. This is what we ask the customer. You need to make sure that the products that you're using work with the key system. I mentioned the master ring system. Can't do key and lever with that. How to use those blind code symbols that we talked about. Authorization procedures. What products do you need a letter of authorization for? Where do you find the forms? What forms do you need to use? Keyed order lead sheets, as well as manual order forms, are in the price book. We require our keyed order lead sheets regardless. We know that a lot of distributors have a software platform that is available for them to give a complete, concise, detailed order. However, we need these first sheets to be filled out. We're going to walk through each one and show you what we need and talk about why we need it. Okay, first lead sheet A at the very top. Obviously, we need to know the customer name and purchase order, as well as the job name and address. For our new systems, we want to identify, is it a new system or is it an existing system? Or is it customer biddings? We can do a key system based on customer biddings as long as we've researched and approved it and gotten a letter of authorization from the owner. Okay. If it's existing, we need to know the system registry number at minimum or previous Corbin Russwin factory order number. Barring that, your top master key bidding in Keyway. Sometimes we can research it there. And that's why, number one, we ask for that job name and address. 3rd Street Elementary School in Paducah, Kentucky might have changed names over those past 10 years. It may be, the Krista McAuliffe Elementary School in Paducah, Kentucky now. And we don't know that because it was 3rd Street when you ordered it. But if you have that address and zip code, we can trace it backwards and kind of extrapolate and figure it out for you. Again, for new systems, we want to define expansion parameters. How many levels of keying do they need? Be realistic. Try to make it logical. Okay. This is a sample of a specification. Establish a new Grand Master key system. Plan for 20 changes under the Grand. Plan for 10 masters with 50 changes under each master. Well, that doesn't mean you need to use them all, but it's there. It's built for you. So when the customer comes and expands the building in 5 years, you can go back and say, all right, under Master AA, we used AA1 through AA7. So our next change under that would be AA8. That's why a relationship with key records is so important. If the owner does any changes, that needs to be coordinated to key records so they can address it. They can add it to that system. System expansion. You want to ask, how many buildings? What does the future hold into this system? What is the maximum number of keyed openings? How do any future buildings lay out here? Now, these are simple questions. If you're dealing with a school district, a hospital, or a college campus, they've got 3-year, 5-year, 10-year plans. So asking those questions, they should already know roughly what they're looking at. So for the field created systems, again, like I said, we have to have their system layout. We need to approve it to make sure they're following Corbin Russwin's rules. They give us a letter of authorization as well as a liability release, we can do it. However, if it is something that does not follow our rules, we talked about the older key systems with 2-step progression. If they're not following that properly, then we might not be able to comply with their requirements. Information for keying into a system. If you look at a key, this is a sample of our one of our Access 3 keys. It shows you the key set symbol. It shows you the system registry number. It also has a blind code for the keyway designation. Every key should have that information. And if that key does not have a Corbin Russwin logo on it, question it. Is this a factory original key? If you're going to decode it, you need to make sure that it is. If it's not a factory original key, we can't be sure that the tolerances will work. If it doesn't have our logo on it, then we know it's not. This is a great form to have. It's right out of our price book. It's a key systems information request form. If you're keying into a existing system, you put all that, as much information as you can. You send that in to key records. They'll process. They'll find the information and get you your next key sets, or what how many changes you have available, and all that important information in expanding a system. So moving on to the order. Number 3, we need to identify the highest level of system. Is it single key differently, or a level 2, 3, 4, 5 higher? Then we want to know the system type. Is it conventional? Is it our M-Heart security? Is it interchangeable core, master ring, pyramid, access 3, or something different? Again, there's required documentation for every initial pyramid or access 3 order. Letters of authorization, notice of acceptance, it's called for the original orders. And then, if required, letters of authorization for subsequent orders. This is where you select your keyway. Is it a stock L4? Is it something special? Sometimes distributors will pick that, and they'll pick the same keyway for every project they ever do because they stock that keyway. Well, that's great for the distributor, but maybe not great for the owner because it runs a risk of key interchange. So if it's a new system, let us develop on the proper, because we know how many L4 systems are out there. We know how many 60 systems are out there, etc. Number of pins, 6 is default. System depth. I didn't talk about this. Corbin Russwin, system 70 for both Corbin and Russwin and Corbin Russwin. System 70 is their default. It's a single step system. Anything before 1970 is what we call pre-system 70. There was a separate specification for Corbin, a special specification for Russwin. It's hard to say it twice. Pre-system 70 is 2-step progression. And we need to know that because the system is important. Access 3 and Access 3 security and high security have their own. They are single step as well, but it's a unique specification. You need to specify that. Specify key stamping. What do you want those keys to look like? If there's any special stamping you want or coining dies, things like that, we can do that. Authorization procedures. This is a sample letter of authorization that is taken right out of our catalog. Just asking Corbin Russwin to authorize a distributor to obtain a copy of the bidding list. Pretty important. Other authorization forms that are sometimes required. Here's the notice of acceptance for pyramid. Here's the notice of acceptance for access 3. Needs to be done for any new systems. Here's the keying and stamping that we talked about. We have both visual key control as well as concealed key control. Visual is stamped on the face, stamped on the key. Concealed would be stamped on the key and stamped in a concealed location on the cylinder. Key quantity requirements. You need to tell us how many keys do you want? Great Grandmaster, how many Grandmaster, etc., etc. How many change keys per cylinder? How many change keys per key to light group? How many control keys? How many of these other special keys do you need supplied? Cross keying. We're not a big fan of cross keying, and we'll explain why. We need to know the key set symbol and what it's being operated by. There's a little bit better detail here. This XAA3 is the receptionist. Well, the receptionist has a key to their door, and it has to be unlocked in order for the Office 1 and Office 2 people to get in. So to make it convenient, XAA3, the X stands for cross keying. It's operated by AA1, AA2, AA, and A. So now there are 5 different keys that can operate that cylinder there at the receptionist. That makes it less secure. It makes it more vulnerable to being picked, being bypassed. So we always say that cross keying should be avoided because it does not fit in a system designed for security. There are 2 different types of cross keying called controlled and uncontrolled. What I'm showing you there is controlled cross keying, which means all the keys that operate that cylinder are in the same master. Sometimes an owner wants to get a little crazy and say, well, I want AB3 and AB4 to also operate that. When you're going across master keys, that's called uncontrolled cross key, and that will degrade the system very, very, very quickly. Again, give us any complex keying instructions, any additional cross keying details need to be spelled out there as well. Okay, next page, sold to. Construction master keying. If it's going to be construction master keying, we need to know that. Pricing. What price list did you bid this off of? Do you have a special quote? What was the date of the quote? What was the quote number? And what was the discount quoted? Without this information, you will get your buying program discount. If you come to us after the fact and say, I should have gotten a discount because I had a quote, there could be a service charge to credit you. Packing and keying for the packing and shipping for the keys. Where do you want the keys to go? Standard Keyways, the keys go with the locks. For security and high security and construction master key, they always pack the change keys separately. So you need to tell us where it all goes to, right? How do you want the boxes labeled? Do you want the key set symbol, the door number, the heading, or all three? And then where do the master keys go? Bidding list. Do you want a bidding list for this job? If you order it with the original order, it is free. You need to have a letter of authorization and tell us where to mail it. If you don't order it with the original order and you ask for it later, you will be charged for it. Contact information as well. Somebody in the organization who knows the project. Sometimes the distributors will use a purchasing agent who doesn't know about the project. Well, that would just slow down the response time and getting answers, getting the factory the information they need quickly. At the very bottom, any additional expansion requirements that are needed. Here's the keying forms. Again, if you have a system like ProTech or ComSense that does a detailed key order, you can send that in on those forms as long as you use those lead sheets. If you're going to fill out these forms, you need to use them. The scary thing about it is this could make your purchase order very thick because there is one specific one for a Lockset, one specific one for cylinders ordered loose, one specific one for exit devices. And if any details change, you need a new form. So we're going to walk through this particular Lockset order form. Again, your customer name information would be their purchase order, then your quantity of how many are on the page, your series and function, your trim, your keyway, your finish, in any options. Now, any of these things change, your function changes, your trim changes, your finish changes, any of these quick codes changes, you need a new form. You have to do a new form for any of those changes at the top. So let's walk through. So we have 3, so let's look at those 3. We have line item 1 is 1, key set symbol AA1, door number A101. Finish the other 2 here. So what we're showing you here, we have door A101 and A102 are keyed alike. They are both key set symbol AA1 under AA Master under A Grandmaster. Door A103 is AA2, which is the second change under AA Master under A Grandmaster. Again, any of those details at the top change, you need a new form for it. Let's take a look at some exit devices. We're going to order some ED5200s and 955 trim, 60 keyway, 630 finish with through bolts and special fasteners. Need our quantity, our key set symbol. We need to specify the handing, our door number, and the heading if you want the heading. Let's finish the rest of this. So as we see here, each one of these has a specific handing. Our A105 is AB1 key set symbol. That is the first change under AB Master under A Grandmaster. Door A106 is AC1, the first change under the AC Master under the A Grandmaster. A107 is AA2, the second change under the AA Master under the A Grandmaster. As long as you fill that minimum of information, we can get that order to you properly. Keyed order checklist. We always ask you to make sure that you check these things before you send it in. Is the existing registry number on the order identified? Do you have the letters of authorization or restricted keyway requests? On a new system, did you give us the expansion requirements? Is the next proper change detailed on an existing system? If you send in an order with AA1 and you already have AA1 used, it's going to be keyed alike and the owner might not want it that way. Are you missing any key set symbols? Are the master key quantities detailed? Did you order control keys if it's interchangeable core? Again, you don't get them unless you tell us. Cross-keying. Did you identify all the information and can it be done? There are certain key systems that will not accept cross-keying. You have to know that. Field established systems. Did we get a release letter from the owner? Have we looked at that system to make sure? Did DHI symbols, are you using those properly as your key set symbols? Did you have the quote number, contact information, and the lead sheets with the order? All of those will help us help you. At this time, I'll open it up for any questions. Go ahead and type any questions that you may have. All right, if you don't have any questions, I will go ahead and end the session. I'd like to thank you all for attendance today and invite you to any future sessions. Thanks all.